appreciate your comment. Thank you for all your comments. I have a question really bothering me. I born in 44 and 48 for Palestine, 48, I'm sorry, Palestine, 44. I left Palestine when I was 4 years old. We went with the refugees camp to Jordan. We stayed in the camp for 10, 15 years or more. And we came to, so what, I want to know what the difference between what the Holocaust and the difference what does Israel do in that. And one follow-up, I went to Jerusalem after 70 years. Since I left Palestine, we never went back. I went there like a year and a half ago with my son-in-law and my daughter and my wife. And I have American passport for 50 years. And when I went to Tel Aviv, for some reason, they scanned my passport and they said, sit down. They took my passport, I sat down for 4 hours. And you don't know what the heck is going to go with you. They're going to throw you in jail. What? And you have American passport, and nothing doesn't really matter if you have American passport or Chinese passport, long you're Palestinian. And the reason I said that because my name Ramadan, and where I born, that's the passport is Palestine. So I have to stay for 4 hours to go into the room and why you coming here, what you've been doing to change your name, all those humiliating questions. So if they don't give a damn about your American passport, how you tell me why this can support Israel by giving weapons to killing those Palestinians? How this became all around? The Jews control this country. I just want to. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to repeat that. We'll take the first part of that, right? You know, when you look at historically what happened in the Holocaust, how does it? You know, I don't want to get into the suffering Olympics because everybody has been through something horrific. But how do you think about what the Jews went through in the Holocaust in Europe compared to what Palestinians have gone through? Like, what are the parallels that you see, and are there any stark differences that led to both of these atrocities?
Well, racism and humanity are nothing new, and they're not exclusive. Racism and humanity exist everywhere. The Holocaust, the name Holocaust is a little troublesome. Because Holocaust means kind of sacrifice by fire, and something kind of heavenly and godly and everything. It's a little bit, but the genocide of the Jews in Europe was brought to an end. The Nazi regime, the Nazi occupation of Europe, the Nazi occupation even of Germany, was brought to an end. The genocide of the Palestinian people has been going on for almost 8 decades. And we could talk about that all day and how that has happened and why it's being allowed and so forth. But like I said before, the cynical use of the genocide of the Jews to justify what the Zionists are doing to Palestinians is cynical beyond words. And the fact that the world is somehow accepting this, that somehow the Zionists get a pass because they happen to be Jewish. So does that mean that you should open the prisons and anybody who's Jewish should be let out? I mean, I don't understand the logic. And I would also add here that Jews have opposed Zionism from the moment the Zionism began. And as early as the year 1900, and this is, I'm going on a tangent here, but I think it gives some context and understanding the difference between Judaism, which is a faith, which is a religion, and Zionism, which is a racist political ideology. In the year 1900, all the most important rabbis in Europe put out a booklet, a warning for Jewish people from the dangers of Zionism. Now, in the year 1900, Zionism had only been around for a very short time, but these rabbis already saw. And in that booklet, which I have, it's interesting, they published it in Hebrew, which was not a language that they used.
Right.
They basically said three things. They said Zionism will bring violence to the Holy Land. It will ruin the good relations that exist between Jews and Arabs and Jews and Muslims, because there are large Jewish communities in Arab countries and all over the Muslim world, and they lived well, they had good relations. And they said it would cast doubt as to the loyalty of Jews in the countries that they exist, because Jewish people are a religious minority throughout the entire world. They always have been. Suddenly, and this is happening. It happened, and it continues to happen, and it happened particularly in the Arab world, where suddenly Jews were faced with this question: well, are they supporting the Zionist thing, or are they Iraqi Jews? Are they supporting the Zionist thing, or are they citizens of the country where they exist? And this was written in 1900. They foresaw what was going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. All these years later, we know that they were right. So, I mean, comparing these two tragedies, I don't know that we can compare them, other than to say the common denominator is racism and inhumanity. And the lesson to be learned, if there's a lesson to be learned, is that we need to make sure that we educate and we teach humanity, and we have no tolerance for violence and racism, or there should be no tolerance. And when we say no tolerance, we should practice that. So on college campuses, they have all these pro-Zionist groups. And if a college campus declares that there should be zero tolerance on that campus for racism, and I ask this question when I speak on campuses: why are they tolerating these Zionist groups, these pro-Zionist groups on campus? Why are they allowed to be there? And over the last year, we've seen what they're capable of doing, just how violent they are in the way that they responded to the movement, the pro-Palestine, the pro-justice movement on campuses. We saw the violence that came from the Zionists. So it's up to us to make sure that this doesn't happen again. It's up to us to end what is happening in Palestine now. I get asked sometimes, do you think this will happen in our generation or the next generation? What? This needs to end now. This needs to end now. The Sixth Fleet, the U.S. Navy's Sixth Fleet, is in the Mediterranean. We pay for it. It works for us. They need to impose a no-fly zone, an arms embargo, and provide humanitarian aid immediately. They work for us. Sending more bombs and weapons and money to the perpetrators of this genocide? What kind of a world are we living in? What kind of strange country is this that we're paying taxes? Not only are they sending our money there, but they're also, but again, like I said, the U.S. Sixth Fleet is there. They can stop it. And we need to also understand and appreciate that all of this could have been prevented, and that nobody else is going to end it but us. There's not going to be a Messiah, Salahuddin, a president, a leader that's going to show up and end it. No. This is it. We're it. We either act and we demand to end it now, and we can talk about how we end it, or it's never going to end. Those are the choices.
That brings me to the second part of that question. I mean, why is our government acting against the interests of the majority of Americans now who want an arms embargo? But we continue to write checks and send bombs. Why is the U.S. so wedded to this genocide?
Well, the U.S. is wedded to Zionism. And the Zionists for over 100 years have been putting everything, investing everything they have, the best people, and everything they possibly can to make sure that that their agenda, that their objectives are met in this country. They started long before they ever established a state. And they understood very early on that in this country, all politics is local. So they've invested in local politics. They still do. Anybody running for school board, city council, sheriff, mayor, in the smallest cities in the middle of nowhere are immediately invited to a tour. They're immediately contacted. They're immediately sent material. They're on it, and they've been on it for 100 years because for them, they can't allow any doubt as to whether or not what they're saying is true, as to whether or not what they're doing is right. The entire education system in this country is a Zionist education system. Americans are Zionists whether they know it or not. If you walk down the street and ask somebody about Palestine, more than 50% chance that they'll confuse it with Pakistan. Right? If you say to the same person Israel, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. They'll know the Holocaust, they'll know the biblical stories, they'll know Israel, they'll know terror, Americans receive because the Zionist movement created organizations throughout this country to make sure that the curriculum is a Zionist curriculum.
Also, the Arab rulers let it happen.
Well, that's another question. That's another question we can discuss if you want, but that's a whole other issue. But the Zionist movement from the very beginning did a very good job in making sure that their interests are met. And that's where we are today. And so when you come up to Americans who receive a Zionist education and suddenly say it's an apartheid state and we need to demand a boycott, their response is, you must be anti-Semitic. And it makes sense in that context that they'll call us anti-Semitic. Because how else, why, what do you mean apartheid? It's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only Jewish state. And there are all these Arab countries and Muslim countries. So why are you picking on them? And there's human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. Why are you picking on this? I mean, in that context, all of this makes sense. But they don't know what they don't know. And nobody's going to teach them but us. And that's why maybe I'll say a word or two about this new initiative that we have in Washington, D.C. We just established an organization and a location in Washington, D.C. called Palestine House of Freedom, Dar al-Hurriya. And we have a large office space on Capitol Hill, 2 blocks away from the Capitol. We put the Palestinian flag and the name Palestine on Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see it from the Capitol. And the most important aspect of our work is to shift the conversation. Because until we shift the conversation, we're going to be stuck. We need to start charting our own path to the liberation of Palestine, to the dismantling of apartheid. And we're not going to do it if all day long we're on the defensive. Exactly. So that's really what this is about. But in the context of the United States, this is the reality, and you can't blame them for doing what is in their best interest. I mean, we can blame them because they're violent, racist, and there should be zero tolerance for them. But they did it in a country that is inherently racist anyway. They talk about shared values between these two countries. Well, there are shared values: genocide, racism, segregation. I mean, there are a lot of shared values between these two countries. Europeans that came and felt that they were better than other people because they were white and they were not white. I mean, that's how this whole thing began. White racist Europeans deciding that it's okay to take the country of people who are not white.
Thank you. I'm the youngest child and I'm obsessed with fairness. So we're going to take a question from this group next. And then this group. Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.
As an American, I've always been struck by how spectacularly the troubles in Palestine reflect American politics. And so a couple of dimensions of that. I'd like to ask your opinion. So one aspect is America has a colonial set of history, its own history of intergenerational trauma, indigenous peoples, and certainly we see something replaying like that here in Israel. But you could also argue that Jews also have a history of intergenerational trauma, looking beyond. It's not necessarily individual to individual generations. So there's definitely that idea that the trauma, the person who's traumatized can disconnect and project and become the abuser in some ways. So the first question I have for you is, to what extent can the politics of memory, the Holocaust itself, become a resource for building bridges in Israel toward one Palestine? That would be my first question. And then the second question, again, the fear of, in American politics, the fear of the other taking over a culture, a white culture, and destroying our culture, destroying who we are. I think that plays out in Israel. The fear, it's always been the fear that, well, if they become the Arab majority, what will happen to Jewish culture, Jewish citizens? How do you, if you're going to build a one Palestine, how do you speak to those fears?
Thank you. So the first question is there a way to honor and memorialize the memory of the genocide of Jews and the Holocaust to build peace in Palestine? Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start there.
Well, right now, the Holocaust is used for the exact opposite purposes. It's being manipulated in order to do the opposite. And so Israeli kids who have nothing to do with the Holocaust, whose families had nothing to do with it, are educated and taken on tours to concentration camps and so on, being told that everybody around you is a potential Nazi, and the Arabs today are the new Nazis, and the Palestinians, all that. So it's not, we're nowhere near knowing how to use that. But sure, of course, any tragedy of such proportions can and should be used to teach humanity and tolerance. But we're far, far from that. And so far as I can tell, all the Holocaust museums and the tolerance museums are directed to teach intolerance and racism towards Palestinians. So that's very, very sad. But I agree with you. I think there's enormous potential in humanity, particularly if we look at people like this gentleman I mentioned, the documentary we made about. By the way, it's called The Orphan. Jacques, who that's exactly what he says. He says if there's any lesson to be learned from this, is that we just need to teach people to be humans, to be people, as opposed to what is being taught right now. What was the second part?
The second question was about this idea that if Jews aren't allowed to continue to run Israel, do they lose part of their culture?
Well, Israel has nothing to do with Jewish culture. It's an implant. It's like white South Africans. They're implants. They don't belong. They're the results of a racist movement of settler colonialism. They don't, but now they're there. They're part of the reality right now. But Israeli culture, such as it is, has nothing to do, or very little to do with Jewish culture. The language is, Jewish people, by definition, have no common language, no common culture, and no common country. They're united by their faith. That's it. That's why you could have Jews in Yemen, Jews in Poland, Jews in anywhere else who don't speak the same language, who don't eat the same food, who don't look alike, practice the same faith. The Zionists came to Palestine and created this new thing and claimed that was Jewishness. It had no faith in it. It's completely secular. It was racist and violent and violated every single Jewish law known to man. Remember this thing of something about 10 commandments about no stealing and no murdering and no killing? The Zionists threw that away right off the bat. Jewish sovereignty in the Holy Land is prohibited by Jewish scripture. Jews are prohibited from sovereignty in the Holy Land. You know, Jews are prohibited from carrying arms. Jews are pacifists. The Zionists are these militant, and even in their own statements, the early Zionists were saying that a Zionist should be the exact opposite of a Jew. Should look nothing or act like nothing, should look or act nothing like the Jew. So, I mean, to claim that, now you're right in that, and I remember this as a child, oh my goodness, if they win the war, oh my goodness, can you imagine if they take over, if they become the majority? Well, they are the majority. The majority of people who live in historic Palestine are Palestinians. So what? So when Palestine is free, the majority of the citizens will be Palestinians. So what? Why is that a problem? If anybody doesn't want to live with Arabs, why did they come to an Arab country to begin with? What were they expecting? And if they don't like it, when Palestine is free, they can go somewhere else. But Palestine is an Arab country, and Israelis are settlers that came from other places. You know, so that's the reality. And I don't know what's wrong with living in a country with a majority of Palestinian Arabs. I mean, I never understood it. I still don't understand it. And again, if somebody doesn't like it, then you shouldn't be living in an Arab country. Palestine has been an Arab country for a very long time.
Thank you. It's your turn, this group.
I thought it was them.
Oh, well, my dad's question doesn't count. Coming back to this group, and it's a bigger group. Okay, green shirt.
Can you speak to how we shift the mindset from a two-state solution to a one-state solution? And what would you say to Arabs or Muslims in the audience, or just in general, who are proponents of the two-state solution? I'd love to hear your perspective.
So the question is, can you expand on why you advocate for a one-state solution? And, what do you think about a two-state solution?
Raise your hand if you strongly believe the two-state solution is a good idea. No, don't, seriously, I'm not. Don't be embarrassed if you do.
Not if we have to debate it with you. Not in this moment.
Because, okay, well, I don't know. What are the virtues of a two-state solution? I'm really puzzled by it. What are the virtues of a two-state solution? That's my first question.
The potential for support from Western superpowers.
I'm sorry?
The potential that the Western superpowers would support.
It's easier to achieve.
Really? The two-state solution has been on the table for decades. Is anybody seeing it getting closer? My second question is this. Let's assume we talk about two-state solution. And because of the reality that we exist in, the assumption is that two-state, the boundaries will be kind of the West Bank and these boundaries that the Zionist state created. Who gets the small country part and who gets the big part? How is that determined? Who gets the bigger part? Who gets the 80%? Who gets the 20%? And why is it? But why is it acceptable that the majority of the population, whose country this was to begin with, need to get the 20%, and the immigrant settlers get the larger portion? Why is that? Can somebody explain that logic to me? Today, can anybody seriously say that makes sense? And the third question is, how is exactly going to happen? How is it going to take place? Is there a scenario that anybody can imagine that the Zionist state that has done everything possible to eradicate the Palestinian people, their culture, their history, their monuments, their cities, took their country and changed its name, took their cities and changed their names, took their streets and changed their names, that country will allow the Palestinians to establish their own independent state on any part of that country, which, according to the Zionist ideology, belongs to the Jewish people. Because according to Zionist ideology, the entire country belongs not to the Israelis, to the Jewish people. So you can't even lease or sell it, portions of it, to anybody who's not Jewish by law. So is there anybody that can really explain to me how, and I've done this. I've done this in an interview. Kim Iverson, I don't know if you guys follow her. She's quite a well-known interviewer. She has her own show and podcast and so on. And I think that was the last time she said that she supports a two-state solution. I said to her, so how's it going to work and why? And one of the reasons she brought up, and I'm not, I've nothing against her. She's wonderful. I don't want, to create the impression that I'm, criticizing her or anything, but it's something that a lot of people think about. And one of the reasons that she mentioned was what the previous question had to do with, it wouldn't be fair to these white European Israelis for them to suddenly have Arab Muslim culture imposed on them, and they would have to live like in Saudi Arabia. These were her words. I'm like, what? I don't even know what that means. So I don't know what the virtues are. I can't figure out by what logic the Palestinians should accept anything less than all of their country. And I have no idea, and I don't think anybody has any idea how it's ever going to be implemented. So that's my answer.
How would a one-state solution in your mind? The two-state solution for so many years? Because I'm in agreement with you. I believe in the one-state solution. I actually don't care what it's called because I
care. I think it should be called Palestine.
But I'm just saying that for the benefit of everybody. But
no, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why the name counts, and it's a good point that you raised. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't care what it counts." Well, let's talk about that. So, going back at least 4,000 years, that country has been known as Palestine by the Egyptians, by the Greeks, by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, you look at documentation. That country has been referred to as Palestine consistently, almost 4,000 years. The partition of the country, which was a Zionist, effort, is called the partition of Palestine. The disarmament agreements were like ceasefire agreements in 1949, after which the state of that new Zionist state was recognized and established, were called the boundaries were, it was described still as Palestine in these agreements, if you read them. Suddenly, everybody forgot that this country is called Palestine and it has to be called Israel. Why? Since May of 1948, everybody forgot that all of those centuries and millennia before that, it was called Palestine. And now they get to determine that. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Why? The name matters. It's been Palestine. There's a famous Mahmoud Darwish poem as well. And so it's Palestine. It should be Palestine. Now, the way it becomes, first of all, that is one state. So what needs to happen, the apartheid state needs to be dismantled and be replaced by a free democratic Palestine from the river to the sea. That's it. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple. We've seen it happen before. The most famous, or probably the most well-known example is South Africa, right? But we've seen racist, fascist, dictatorial regimes fall and be replaced by democracies. I can go on for just in my lifetime. The list goes on and on and on. So it's a one-state apartheid. It needs to be transformed into a one-state democracy with equal rights. That's the progression. I can't think of anything. Again, I'm not saying it's easy, but I can't think of anything more simple explanation than that.
I'm going to come over here. Reverend Fahad.
I want to say to Annie that our preparer gave us $1,000. And he went to his car and wrote a map of Palestine older than 100 years old. He wanted to give it to me. I think we need to auction it here. We start with 250 later on. Whoever gives money, the foundation gets this money. My question to Miko is this. Tonight or this afternoon, you are confusing us. You are telling us if we take the U.S. Constitution and put it in the state of Israel, it will blow it to pieces, number one. Number two, the second day after October 7th, when Netanyahu looked at the American television, and said, "This is our 9/11." Immediately, I said, "God Almighty, language is powerful." He's going to say to the President of the United States, that's the way they talk, leaders. You destroyed, with 9/11, you destroyed Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and everybody else under the sun. And let me hanky-panky with 29 miles and 10 miles. And I think the president says, God bless, I'll give you money and I'll give you ammunition. That's the action. To me, we need to convince our American people that the Palestine problem is a U.S. problem. And we need, with the leadership of the young people, to turn the table around and start working on this. So I want to say thank you. So tonight, I hope this afternoon before they leave, they will give money for the foundation because we need to give more scholarship. Is that okay? Thank you.
That wasn't really a question.
I saw this gentleman in the blue shirt in the back.
So one way that I've thought about the genocide in Gaza is that it's a massive high-tech lynching, white supremacist lynching. And in that connection, I've been very impressed by the National Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, that Brian Stevens and the Equal Justice Initiative created several years ago, and the work they've done to keep expanding the memorial there, but they also do work with communities across the country where lynchings occur, including here in Gwinnett. So my question is, do you think there's ever going to be a possibility to build a Gaza memorial, Gaza genocide memorial? Maybe in Rafah, I don't know where it would be. You have to put an iron dome over it, so it's really blowing up. But in what, and in the report, Anatomy of Genocide, that Princess Albanese, this UN Special Rapporteur, issued some months ago, one of the recommendations is there needs to be restitution, and there needs to be acknowledgement, accountability, and there needs to be some kind of a remembrance component put in place so that this will not happen again. And I realize this is a tiny piece of a much bigger issue we're talking about, but I do think symbolism matters. And how many Holocaust, and I don't begrudge them, but how many Holocaust memorial days are there? And I called, several people in Congress the week before the night of the next day and said, "Are you planning to do anything?" And they said, "What's not?" And I thought, well, that's what happens when there's only one Palestinian American in Congress, and for AIPAC, that's one too many. Yeah. And we need to do something again, to build the acknowledgement that a genocide did happen, and that it's been happening for the past 60 years, and it needs to stop. And one part of that is education. And in my mind, I have a picture, I'm going to shut up, but I have a picture of, something like the lynching memorial in Montgomery, beautiful art, reflecting pool, and then the names of all of the victims, and the names of all of the people who complicit, and the names of the courageous handful of people, the people in this room today, who dared to speak up against it at considerable personal cost before it was too late. So that's my one question. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And can
So
I
that-
say I second him?
Yeah.
And let's build it in DC, Washington DC.
We've got the flag.
We are,
now.
we are actually in the process. We're going to open a Palestine Genocide Museum at the Palestine House of Freedom. We have a very big space. So we're already talking to, you might know, there's a Palestine Museum in Connecticut. It's a wonderful museum. And the curator, Faisal Saleh, has been down several times, and we're already in conversation with an architect because we have a whole space there that can be dedicated to that. And we're actually been talking about that already, about opening a Palestine Genocide Museum in Washington, D.C. Yeah. And I'm sure that once Palestine is free, there will be plenty of memorials. I'm sure there will be. Yeah.
We have time. We're a little bit over time. Let's do 2 questions and we're going to come back.
Hi, good to see you. I've been following your speech on videos for a decade now.
Thank you.
My question is, the Semitism, the anti-Semitism has been like a nuclear bomb, basically. You put people this happen on their tracks. So I come from a country where we consider ourselves Semitic because of language. I'm from East Africa, from Eritrea. We have the same faith because Eritrea was actually given to the Zionists by the British initially, but they declined it. Thank God for us, but too bad for the Palestinians, unfortunately. So how do you dismantle that Semitic? I think the Palestinians have, this is my son, we always say, why aren't they pushing back saying, we are the real Semitic? Because they've been using it, now it's like whenever it says Semite, it's only for Israelis, but nothing about the Palestinians, they're just Arabs. So how do you dismantle that word? How do they take it back? We all need to take it back. Because for me, I tell people that I'm a Semite myself. So it's not only Israeli, so how do the Palestinians take it back?
So I'll repeat the question really quick. Palestinians are Semites. There are many people around the world who are also Semitic, but the term Semitic has been kind of wholly owned by Jewish people, Israelis specifically. But, how do we take it back? How do we, everyone's just, the overwhelming narrative through the propaganda machine has been that it only applies to Jewish people, and it's been weaponized, right? So is there a way for us to take it back, or should we just stop playing with Zionist talking points and talk about something else?
It's a smokescreen. It's a smokescreen. The only people that talk about this are them and then us when we respond to it. It's an absurd, every so often, because the entire Zionist narrative is built on lies, they need to keep creating new and new and new misinformation and lies. And then they create this entire defense system where if you reject their claims, then you are something bad. So the latest one is anti-Semitic. My recommendation is what Stephanie said. I don't engage in this. There's a genocide going on. That's the conversation. It's like Iran. Oh my goodness, Iran. There's a genocide taking place in Palestine. Don't change the subject. Iran is not threatening anyone. The problem is the Zionist regime in Palestine is engaged in a genocide. That's the conversation. And they throw in all these smoke screens trying to change the conversation, and it works. The problem is that the rest of the world, like sheep, just looks where they point and nod their heads instead of saying, don't change the subject. You are a genocidal criminal regime and you've got to go. That's the only thing that matters. Who they say is Semite or not Semite is a conversation that is not going to take us to where we need to go, which is to save the Palestinian people from a genocide. So that's my response to that. I'm not saying it's not an important conversation. I'm saying in the context of what we're facing in Palestine, that wouldn't be my first priority.
All right, question for Aaron. We had 2 hands in the back. What you got?
Very honored to be here today. I was traveling from Florida to North Carolina. Stopped by to meet this gentleman. We said you have to come here, and I'm very happy actually to be here. It's been now 11 months. We're close to a year, and every day you're seeing a lot of people like dying, suffering. We did a lot of things. We did the protest, we shout out, we spoke, but it's still going. So we feel helpless sometimes, like we get to that, like emotionally, so what we can do, we can't do anything. But, like I will put my questions in two parts. Like number one, what we have accomplished. So we look at that just to lift us up, kind of. It's not a victory yet, but something that we have changed in the past 11 months. And number two, the second part of the question, what we can do as individuals. Like, let's put it in practical. So what we can do, everybody in his part, in his field, so we can walk out from here and we put that as the last question, right? I don't know if you accept the other question. And thank you very much, because when I walked in here and I saw a Muslim and Jews and a Christian, it's held in a church, and I see also like a white, African American, from everywhere, and this is where we believe that this is a humanitarian case, and this is where we have to begin with. This is where we have to stand with. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question, right? We've all witnessed 11 months of just harrowing, live streamed death and destruction. Is there anything in your mind that you feel like is worth celebrating?
Just something to lift us up.
Something, I mean, listen, I'll say as an activist, before Miko, give you some time to think about what you want to say, but I've never seen this many people care about Palestine, right? I've been Palestinian my whole life and nobody has ever cared. It felt like nobody ever cared what we went through, right? And that if just existing as Palestinian is offensive to people and our mere existence is insulting, and it means that we're bad people and that we don't like Jewish people and all of these things. And I feel like the tide is turning. I feel like Palestine has a seat on the world stage right now, and we have this zeitgeist moment to educate so many more people. And amidst all of the horror and death, I feel like that is something that we've gotten out of this. We're at the forefront of the consciousness right now. And so I'm curious is there anything that you see?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I was at a couple of events recently that were kind of had a celebratory, theme to them. There's the Ramallah Convention, which is a big celebratory event where people who are, descendants from Ramallah get together. It's a huge convention. Taibeh, before that, it's another Palestinian town, and other events like that. And there were people that were feeling a sense of, should we be celebrating? I mean, these, because it's usually there's a beautiful dinner and there's performances and it's kind of, celebratory. And people were feeling just uncomfortable with that as we see this horrific, sadistic slaughter of Palestinians take place. And the point that I made, I was invited to speak, and the point that I made was, what is it that these brave fighters from Gaza are fighting for? What is it that they're dying for, if not to see Palestinians celebrate their identity, celebrate their heritage, celebrate young Palestinians marching in with flags and singing the national anthem and so on? So I think it's there are moments of pride even within this horrific tragedy. What these brave Palestinians that came out of Gaza were able to do in terms of politically and militarily is to, in many ways, shut down the apartheid state, paralyze many aspects of it, completely, or almost completely take away eliminate the sense of security that the settlers had, the Israeli settlers, Zionist settlers have in Palestine. Now they're paying an enormously inhumane price. At the same time, I think there's no way that they didn't anticipate this. Palestine is certainly on the map like it's never been before. So, and one thing that, I'm very proud of is that we opened the Palestine House of Freedom the day before the leader of the apartheid state came to speak in front of Congress. And so we expected a small little reception. We put up the flag and put up the sign. A lot of people came. And a lot of people were moved by, we put up the flag. We had somebody sing the Palestinian national anthem and so on. And there's a place in Washington, D.C. for people to come in. I mean, everybody's welcome to come visit. There's Palestinian art. We're displaying. We're building the museum. We're doing a lot of things. But there's a Palestinian flag on Pennsylvania Avenue, very close to the Capitol. And I think a lot of the enthusiasm and the energy to put all that together is a result of what happened on October the 7th. And of course, I mentioned what's been happening on campuses, the way these courageous students, many of whom are not even Palestinians. It's like you said, some are Jewish, some are Black, some are this, some are that, but they're all united in this struggle, for a better humanity. Everybody's united in that because Palestine is not a religious issue and it's not a political issue. It's an issue of values. You either support racism and violence or you reject it. You either support humanity and human rights and justice or you don't. It's actually quite a simple equation. So that's where we are today. And even in times of such horror, we can still see moments where we can feel hopeful. At the same time, we have to be very careful because, like I said before, it's not going to end until we end it. Nothing's going to happen on its own. Nothing's going to happen by anybody else. We are it. We have to end it. We have to take it upon ourselves to get up every morning and do everything we possibly can to secure the safety or to guarantee the safety or create a reality where the safety and security of Palestinians are guaranteed somehow. Because right now, a Palestinian can be killed anywhere and there are no consequences. In Palestine, around Palestine, as far as Tehran, it doesn't matter. And that's up to us. That's on us. How we do it, I have my idea. That's why I initiated and I'm part of this initiative of the Palestine House of Freedom. Because I know that right now there's nothing I can do to stop a Palestinian child in Gaza from dying and being hungry and homeless. There's nothing I can do. All the relief, all the millions that we sent to relief is stuck in the border in Rafah. Millions of dollars that have been thrown out. People are doing this, obviously with great intentions, but that's not going to solve the problem. We need to end it forever. We need to guarantee a free Palestine from the river to the sea so the Palestinians are free and safe forever. And that's, to me, the most important thing right now. So that's my way of trying to create hope and then doing everything I can to see that hope materialize. That's what I got.
So before we wrap, a lot of people are showing up here today because they care deeply about Palestinians and the genocide. Do you have some tangible things you shared? We should be supporting students on college campuses. I wholeheartedly agree. They are the tip of the spear in so many ways for us. Is it worth it to write our reps? Is it, what should we be doing every day when we wake up?
Well, I think that we need to come to terms with the fact that we're facing a very steep and slippery, mountain. And it's going to take time and it's going to take effort and it's going to take a lot of creativity to do what we're trying to do. Palestine House of Freedom, we realize this. We want to take country where, in particular in Washington, D.C., where there's 1,000% support for this horror that we're seeing in Gaza. And that support is being translated to money and bombs. It's not just, talking points. And we want to shift the conversation to dismantling apartheid and allowing a free Palestine to take its place. The gap requires, and this is something that I've written in my office, closing this gap requires circumventing the business as usual politics through creative strategies. We have to figure out these creative strategies. We have to figure out, what do we have? What do they have? They have the money, they've got influence, and they've got a history of doing it. We on the ground, which is now displayed every single day through social media, that cannot be disputed. They would give anything to have what we have. So we have to figure out, with the advantage that we have with these things, how we shift the conversation and shift the policy. So I think we need to wake up every morning and try to figure out how to do that, and then call me or send me a message and saying, here's how I think we can do this. Because we're going to need everybody's effort. We're going to need everybody's thoughts on this. Nobody has an answer. And the common wisdom is that it cannot be done. It can't be done because all the congressmen are bought and sold, all the politicians are bought and sold, and the Zionists are all powerful. I don't believe that's true. Apartheid fell in South Africa, dictatorships fell in Latin America, and on and on and on and on and on. And they were all supported by this empire. So it can be done. So my best answer to that is, we need to figure out that strategy. We need to work together, get in touch with me, organize a little group here, figure out how you educate, figure out how you educate your neighbors and your family members to a point where you no longer have to have these conversations about one state, two state, but we can have a conversation how to further a free Palestine. And I am, I'm very hopeful and confident that is possible, or else I wouldn't be here. It's just that we all need each other to get this done. And I know that if we all work together, we can get it done.
Thank you. Thank you, Miko. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I can't imagine anyone is leaving this room without having learned something or being motivated by something, and shifting your perspective on the horror that Palestinians have been facing for 8 decades now. Thank you again to Dr. Khoury and to Miko for bringing us all together, creating this space, and sharing wisdom with this group. I want to share a couple of additional specific ways you can help, because, guys, we're here for the Laurice Khoury Foundation today. This is an important one. You can donate directly to the Laurice Khoury Foundation to continue the life-changing work they are doing with Palestinian students with disabilities. We have a donor who will match $5,000 in donations that are made this weekend. That puts us to $10,000, and that means 4 years of school for a Palestinian college student. So the people in this room can send a student to school for 4 years in Palestine if we get $5,000 in donations, which will be matched. Not to mention this amazing picture of pre-1948 Palestine here that was donated by our friend Patrick. So the highest donation today, we'll take that home as well. The last thing I'll say is, please follow the Laurice Khoury Foundation, follow Miko on socials. We all know about shadow banning. You've got to comment, like, high five, everything on social media to not stop the suppression of pro-Palestinian voices. And please read Miko's book. So sadly, UPS did not get them here in time. But Miko has a few of them. So like 5 lucky people today will get a book signed by Miko, but the rest of you, please read his books. They are life-changing. He is a beautiful writer. He's as good of a writer as he is a speaker. So worth reading. Buy a copy for your friends. And thank you all for being here today. And please do not stop talking about Palestine.
One correction. Stephanie.
Oh, please.
The portrait was donated by Sam Day.
Oh, sorry, not Patrick. Donated by Sam. Thank you, Sam.
And, we don't discriminate. People can give us cash or check, or can go online and give the foundation. We need to reach all those lines.
That's right. We'll take donations in any form, Reverend Fahad says. All right, thank you, everybody.